One spring. It was springtime on the island of Sodor. The island had never looked so beautiful than in the center of springtime. All the engines were very happy, especially one spring. He was hoping to be finished today. April 17th was going to be a very special fair at the seaside. He wanted to take the passengers. If I get to take the passengers, he told Billy, it will be my first time out in 5 years. 5 years, said Brianni, that's so special. It is, said One Spring. I can't wait to be out and about again. Stanley collected a freight car of water. He was taking it to filter all the water towers on Sodor. Stanley was supposed to do it, said One Spring, but the Fat Controller assigned him other work. Then a workman arrived. One Spring, I'll be right back. I'm on my lunch break. I'll have to go pick up one more part afterwards. Can you wait till just a while longer? Of course, said One Spring. I'm going to get out finally. This work's never had the right parts for me, so now I'll be finally getting to leave. Then, his driver arrived. The Fat Controller has come. He has very important news for you. Are you ready to go, One Spring? Yes, I am, said One Spring. He was lying. He only wanted to get out of the works for the first time in 5 years. One Spring was excited. If the Fat Controller asks me to take the train, this'll be my first day out in so long. One Spring, boomed the Fat Controller. As Stanley is busy, I'll be expecting you to take the very important passengers to the beach today on Duck's branch line. Are you ready to go? Yes, sir, said One Spring. But he was lying. He really had to get out of the yards. He couldn't sit another 5 years. Great, said the Fat Controller. I'll expect you there by 3 o'clock today. No worries, sir, said One Spring. They'll have me all fired up and ready to go in no time. That's great to hear, old engine. My oldest engines are my most resourceful, said the Fat Controller. Now I must go to a very important meeting. I shall see you later, One Spring. Yes, of course, said One Spring. But One Spring had a bad feeling in his boiler. But the idea of getting to go out was more important. Oliver will have assistance if you need it. All right, said One Spring. He'd forgotten how to get to the beach anyhow. One Spring's driver was ready to fire him up. His firebox fizzed, and his boiler felt warm, and with a splendid toot of his whistle, he was ready to go, and he puffed out of the yard. I'm going away, he called excitedly. One Spring's wheels jarred as he puffed along the rails. He was steaming his way across Great Waterton. Oh dear, she said. I shouldn't have lied. I wasn't ready to go and I knew it. Are you all right? Cried the driver. Yes, I am, said One Spring. He was determined to pull the train, but he had to make it to the station first, and it was not going well. Goliath saw him and had nothing positive to say. You're a useless piece of scrap, said Goliath. You don't even belong on the rails. You belong in the scrap yards, he said. Find yourself an old siding and rest there until they come to collect you, you fine old piece of scrap. Whoosh! Cried One Spring. I can do my job, something that you're not doing. Rubbish, said Goliath. Go find yourself an old shunting shed. Then Thomas arrived. Goliath, here are your coaches. There's no reason to be so rude. There's no cause to be so mean, puffed Thomas. How are you, One Spring? I expect you're going to the fair today, he said kindly. Yes, I am, said One Spring. To the fair I will be going. And he thundered away. But his wheels jarred again, and he was shaking this time. "That old heap of scrap, the poor stupid freak," cried Goliath. "No worries," said Thomas. "I'm sure you can do it," he cried encouragingly. But One Spring was not so sure, and neither was Goliath. "He'll give up soon enough." One Spring arrived at Knapford Station. He came off the rails. "Oh dear," he cried as the driver levered him back onto the rails. "You must be One Spring. My name is Gator. I've heard so much about you. All the other engines tell tales about the good old One Spring, and it means so much to finally meet you." One Spring blushed. "Well, thank you. He was flattered. He didn't know what to say. I'm Charlie. I like telling jokes. And my name's Philip. We're the younger engines on Sodor, but we're very hard workers, as are you." "Yes, I am," said One Spring. "Now, have any of you any idea how to get to the sandy yellow beaches?" Just then, Oliver, the Great Western engine, bustled into Knapford with his brake van towed. "Hello! Oh, One Spring. Is that it? I know how to get to the sandy yellow beaches. You just take my route. I'll lead the way, but you'll have to wait a while. I have to collect my passengers and the workmen to set up the tables and deck chairs." "Yes, Mr. Good Old One Spring," cried Toad. "We'll be right with you. Don't worry, old engine. We'll help you on your way again." One Spring was cross. "How dare you? Old engine," he fussed. "I'll show you who's an old engine. Old engines are still really useful, but Oliver had meant to be helpful." I'm sorry, Mr. One Spring," said Oliver. I was only trying to be helpful. No rude intentions." But One Spring was cross. "I don't need any help. I can do it on my own." Then Diesel gave him a mighty bump. "Get on, you," said Diesel. "Old engines shouldn't hang around." "Ouch!" cried One Spring. Now he was worried. "Hey, see you later, oldie," he cried. "Bill," said Ben, "why do you think Edward's so hard on us, making us collect his flatbeds?" "Because," protested Bill, "he's an old fusspot like this one here." "Watch yourself," said One Spring. "I've had enough of you engines teasing me." "You're too small to pull coaches," said Bill, cheekily. "I only think that little engines should pull little trucks," said Ben. "We are bigger engines, that's why we're pulling a big flatbed." "Yeah, okay," said One Spring. "You two are stuck on silly freight work, while I'm pulling the rail passengers to the big beach fair today," cried One Spring. "You two are just worthless little engines who cause trouble all day. Just because I've been in the works for 5 years having my springs reworked doesn't mean I don't know things." Bill and Ben whimpered and twinkled. "Why are you two playing here still?" said Edward. "I thought I sent you on your way." Bill and Ben scurried off. They were very sad. "Oh, he's so rude," whimpered Bill. "I don't like him," said Ben. "Oh, One Spring, there's no real harm to them. How are you?" "I'm great, Edward," said One Spring. "I just don't feel so right about myself." "Well, there was always the time when I had that accident in the rain, and the driver, fireman, and conductor went along loosening the couplings between me and my coaches, and once again I was started back on my way, and I reached the station in just enough time. It made the passengers very pleased, and even the fat controller. Even Gordon and James remained respectfully silent." "You know what," said One Spring, "you're right. Thank you, Edward." But One Spring's only spring was feeling very weak indeed. One Spring made his way to the station, where Skarloey would be meeting him. He stopped to collect passengers. "At last, a rest," he said. Then Skarloey arrived. "Are you all right, One Spring?" cried his driver. "I heard a loud snap on the way." Yes, I am just fine," said One Spring. I can do it." All right then, said the driver. We'll just wait for the passengers to disembark. Then Skarloey arrived. Hello, One Spring. It's so good to see you. Oh, Skarloey, yes it is. It's been such a long time, said One Spring. And it feels so good to be out again. Yes, it does indeed, said Skarloey. How are your springs, and how are your wheels? My driver's here to meet with the station master. He has to pick up a very special package, said Skarloey. Well, all is well, said One Spring. You don't look well, cried Skarloey. Well then, my springs have been feeling a little weak, but I lied to my driver because I can't stay in the works anymore. 5 years too long. I must get out and stretch my wheels every once in a while. Well, I understand, said Skarloey. I remember when my springs gave way, but I still got the train home. I won't have that problem, said One Spring. I can do it with no trouble. No fear. Suit yourself, said Skarloey. It's so good to see you again. Have a nice run. Thank you, cried One Spring as Skarloey puffed away. That little engine is so helpful. Come along, One Spring, it's time to go, cried his driver. Of course, said One Spring, but he was getting more and more worried. Every time they started up again, he knew he'd have more trouble. Oh dear, cried One Spring as they started. He bumped along the line. His wheels were jumping everywhere. Oh, even his coach was cross with him. As they puffed along the old quarry road, One Spring was sauntering. Then there was trouble. A spring gave way. The train came to a grinding halt. One Spring was stuck. Too bad, oldie, said the driver. We'll have to give up and rest here and wait for a bus to collect us. No, said One Spring. Let me finish the job. I can't go back to the works. 5 years too long. I must take this train. Then they heard a loud whistle and the thundering of wheels on the tracks. The engine was puffing very quickly, and she was thundering along. She was going very fast. Her wheels were spinning faster and faster as she steamed along. Who's that? Cried One Spring. His driver jumped in the cab. Uh-oh, cried the driver. It may be done for us. Oh, let them hit me. It's about time. I've given up anyway, said One Spring. This will be my valediction, I suppose. And he shut his eyes. The impact got stronger and stronger. One Spring feared going. It was Rosie. She could see One Spring on the line, and she decided to apply her brakes as fast as she could to prevent a nasty accident. Finally, she stopped. What are you doing on the old quarry road, One Spring? She asked. My spring gave way, he said. Will you please shunt me to the beach? He said sheepishly. I can only shunt you as far as Great Waterton, said Rosie, because that's where I'm picking up my passengers for my train. Is that helpful enough? She asked sweetly. Yes, said One Spring. Please take me to Great Waterton. And then I'll go on and finish the train. No, said Rosie, you have to take a break. But One Spring was not listening as he shuddered along. Stanley was working at Great Waterton. He had just filtered the water tower. Well done, One Spring. You look very useful. One Spring was disappointed. He didn't feel very useful having Rosie shunt him into the station. The passengers were not cross, as One Spring would have expected. Rosie spoke kindly to her friend One Spring. One Spring, why is it so important that you finish this train? It's all right if a bus just comes to collect your passengers, and you can go back to the works. I can't, said One Spring. It's been 5 years, and they still don't have the right parts to fix me. I don't understand why I just don't go to the works on the Skarloey Railway. It's so much better there. They'll always have the right parts, and I'll be out and about in no time at all. Well, why don't you ask, said Rosie. It's better than getting yourself hurt just to pull a train. You don't understand, said One Spring. This train was special to me, and I have to get it to the seaside. I'll get it to the seaside, or my whole body will collapse. My whole boiler will explode. I don't care. Another spring gave way and came loose. Poor old One Spring was going to get himself into even more trouble. When good old One Spring came back to it, he no longer had the silly springs in his wheels, and Diesel even was impressed. But One Spring could not have felt happier to be repaired.